introduction fairly succinctly. The site is in the HCMU Highway Commercial Mixed Use Zone, and it is a permitted use in the zone. As Mr. Klee indicated, the applicant's here to amend the application and is reducing the size of the total building area for the site. We had some questions regarding the revised circulation plan on site, and would appreciate some testimony as it relates to the buffers for the perimeter of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Mr. Alfieri.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. As the board professionals have indicated, this is an application for amended preliminary and final site plan approval. We did receive approval from you, this board, last year for 3 warehouse buildings. As the board professionals indicated, that plan is being attempted to be revised tonight to consolidate 2 warehouses buildings into 1 larger one, and then a slightly larger 3rd building, but there'll be a net reduction in the size of the square footage of the warehouses. We have 4 witnesses that we're presenting. We'll get as far as we can, and we're going to call Mr. Cardinale first.
Mr. Cardinale, if you kindly raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony or information you're about to give will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. Yeah, I apologize. You have to speak into the mic. And also, can you just briefly give us your affiliation to the applicant? Thank you.
Sorry, I do.
Thank you.
And Mr. Cardinale, what is your relationship to the applicant?
I am the developer and partner in the project.
And for the boards, just to remind the board, there may or may not be some new members. Can you give the board a general overview of your vision as to this entire property, not just the property that's the subject of tonight's application?
Sure. Well, first I'd like to address the false statements, if I may, that have been on social media about the project. It is certainly not a warehouse project. It is still a sports and recreation project. We've done everything in this particular application tonight to satisfy some of the neighbors that were unhappy in the original approval. What this is a modification. It's actually 16% decrease in the building size. It's about 28% decrease in the number of parking spots. We've increased the buffers from 2 to 3 times as much as we could to help some people over on Holly Tree Court. The site lighting will be shielded from the residents. Truck access will not come out on Anderson Road. It will not go in front of the children on baseball fields. It will be contained to just one road parallel to Main Road. And kids will not be running in front of 18-wheelers. These are the things that I was reading in the last couple of days, so I just wanted to make sure I made it clear that this is still a sports and recreation project with the ultimate goal of building a medical research center for curing and hopefully ending MS on this earth. I'm still building my MS research center at this site. And that is my main goal personally, but I will hopefully satisfy many families and the town with a wonderful sports and recreation project.
Hey, can you go back to prior to the approval of the warehouse project that is currently in place? You mentioned a prior plan that the Anderson Road residents actually filed appeal to challenge, and what provisions were made? What was the purpose of that appeal, and how was it resolved?
It was resolved by me eliminating the residential component of the property of the project next to Anderson Road. It was also removing of the golf tenant that I had. I had brought Big Shots golf people and the Top Golf people over to the site, and they had tremendous interest in becoming a tenant. people on the road were very unhappy with the height of the net and the height of the lighting, felt it would make their lives very uncomfortable. So we had to come back with another solution, and the solution was to get the 3 warehouses approved, which they are approved and we could build them. But we found from the market that they don't want 3 warehouses out there, they prefer to have 2, and that's why we're here tonight. We've eliminated the residential component on that side of the project and moved it over interior to the other side of the project, away from Henderson and Hollywood.
And you do not have actual end users lined up yet, is that correct?
Correct.
The other question, I guess, is in terms of phasing. Phase 1 of the property has already been cleared to some extent, and you'll be starting construction so that this project will be developed independent of Phase 1, is that correct?
Correct. This will be totally independent of Phase 1.
Except they'll share access.
Correct.
And again, for the Anderson Road people, there will be no access on Anderson Road other than a emergency access point.
Yes, emergency access point was something that the town had recommended. We agree. It's the safest way to get people out in case there's anything wrong on the main road.
There are many technical items, so Mr. Borden, Mr. McFarland, and Mr. Ray will get into the technical issues. I just wanted Mr. Cardinelli to get up to introduce himself to the members who don't know him and to give you a little history as to how we got here tonight. That's all we really have of him, and if you have questions, he'd be glad to answer them.
Anyone from the board? Question? Yes, Mr. Aaron.
Yeah, this is Len Herring. So these warehouses are commercial warehouses?
Yes, sir.
Like any place else, trucks will be coming in with goods or whatever you use. I mean, you haven't determined whether or not what the uses are going to be, but it's a big open area. It could be one tenant, many tenants, whatever.
Based on the location, I don't think it'll be many tenants. It will probably be a national tenant.
It could be a warehouse like an Amazon type warehouse.
Don't know if they would come this far interior. They like to focus on the turnpike and those type of roads, but it could happen.
And this is in the back of your regular sports areas.
Yes, it's in the location where we originally had the golf, parallel to Anderson Road. And obviously, I didn't want to see a warehouse there. I would have preferred to see the golf there and the convention center and everything else that we had to move over. We moved the convention center over. We moved many things that were there over. So we've created a very large buffer from Anderson and the community right next door. And even on the interior part of the project where we have the hotel, the convention center, and the ball fields, we didn't want to see the warehouses. I didn't feel that that was something I wanted. So we've created a very, very nice landscaping buffer between the warehouses and us. We will not see the warehouses internally. And my goal is to not let the people that live on the road and in that community see the warehouses either. With the buffering and the landscaping and the distances that we've created and the angles we've created, we will do everything in our power to make sure that both the residents of Jackson on that road will not see them and we will not see them.
So the access to those warehouses will not impede anywhere on the sports access?
No, it's very, very critical to us. We did not want the trucks passing in front of the children by the fields. So we kept them in the back of the pads, directly into the warehouse location, and then out the same road that they came in a hard right, and they're only 600 feet off of 195. The 195 corridor is a perfect warehouse location, right? Because they're not going through communities or through the town.
All right, thank you.
How are they gonna get there?
Anyone else? I just have a question. have a tenant or any tenants lined up for these warehouses, why the redesign? Why?
That's a great question, and I knew I'd get it. When I'm out there marketing a property and listening to what people want and what they're gonna need, we had originally come to the board, if you recall, with the option of the recreation and the option of having a very large warehouse. We wanted 2, but that evening we got the approval for 3. And I think the reason why we didn't get the 2 was a good reason. Some of the board members were concerned about the neighbors. They were concerned about the road. They thought that the design was not conducive to making the neighbors happy. So it's given us an opportunity to go back with my team, and the technical people have come up with a very good way to eliminate the reason why we didn't approve it in the first place. If 650 was something that we wanted, we certainly have 100,000 more square feet right now approved that we could build right now. I'm actually reducing the size of the building, right? But I'm reducing it so that it becomes more marketable, has more opportunity of what that industry wants. They want the distribution with one larger warehouse. It's more efficient. So it gave us enough time to sit back and look at the buffering off of the Holly Court. It gave us enough opportunity to figure out how we would create a berm and what angle the berm had to be at for the building, not to be seen by people on Anderson Road. And it also gave us an opportunity to sit and look at all ball fields and our hotel and our convention center. And the Hilton Garden Inn is going to be a beautiful banquet facility. And the banquet is right in the back of the warehouse. Now, I don't think anybody be booking a hotel and a banquet for their daughter if they thought they were looking at a warehouse, right? So it gave us enough opportunity to come back and say, what are we going to do to make sure that when the bride's there and the family's there and they're looking outside this hotel, they're not looking at a warehouse. And we're at the same height of people on Anderson Road. So great question. The market wants something like that, but we've come back and come up with some solutions cosmetically with the landscape to make sure that we don't see the warehouses either from our side. This will be an isolated spot on our property, will not be part of the recreation and hospitality part. It'll strictly be a solution to do something with that land, because we originally came here with a solution for recreation with the golf, but it was turned down. People didn't like it. So this was what we came back with. And the market is dictating that 650 should be the number.
Anybody else? Yes.
Residents are affected with this project.
I can't tell you the exact number, but I don't think it's more
We
than
don't think
20
any are affected, but there are neighbors.
neighbors.
How many neighbors, how many homes are there next to the project?
I believe there's 2 that are facing the project from Holly Court. There's more on Holly Court, but there's 2 actually there. And there's, I think, more than a dozen people on Anderson Road that are facing the project. They're not hundreds of people that are directly, but it's not, listen, 1 is too many if they're unhappy, right?
Right.
So we're doing everything we can to make even that 1 happy.
Okay.
And I'm very critical, you can ask my team, very critical about cosmetics. I want it to look beautiful. So we have done everything we can to isolate that use within the project. We have almost 300 acres. This didn't take up that much of it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Alfieri?
Thank you. Mr. Borden?
Mr. Board, if you'd raise your right hand, you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony and information you're about to present to the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Give us your full name, spell your last, your affiliation, and give you the number of times you've been here, just a brief
Certainly.
synopsis.
Name is Ian Borden, last name Borden, B-O-R-D-E-N, President of Professional Design Services in Lakewood, New Jersey. I am a graduate of Rutgers University 38 years ago. Been with the bachelor's degree, been working in the engineering and planning field since 1983, starting with employment with the Township of Toms River as a conservation officer, and then into private practice with a number of different, two different engineering firms, Fellows Reed and Associates, Mazer and Associates. I've been with PDS since 1996, president since 2005, and a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. Thank you.
And Mr. Borden, your firm has been involved in this project since its inception, is that correct?
We have.
All right, and we're going to be referring to various exhibits. Is the first one that's up there good enough for your initial presentation?
I believe I'd like to go to the first one, please. This is the second one. Thank you.
And we
So
should
that's
identify A1, and can you identify, do you know what the legend is on that plan?
Yes, A1 is the overall site plan from the set of plans approved by the planning board in August of 2020. The second one, might as well scroll through them, I guess, just to identify them if you don't mind. The second one is the overall site plan from the amended plans that were submitted for this hearing. We have added some color to the landscaping for purposes of the meeting. And then the third one is architectural renderings of the building elevations that were submitted to the board as part of the application, for the amended application.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you don't mind, go back to the first one. Thank you. Okay, to start, just a little bit of bookkeeping. Phase 2 of Adventure Crossing is proposed on lots 5, 6, 19, and 20 in block 3001. It's located along the south side of Monmouth Road, adjacent to the Route 195 ramp and Anderson Road, contains 72.7 acres. This again, A1 is the overall map of the approved project. You see on the right side of the map what I'm describing with the marker is Anderson Road. And on top, on the north side of the property is the ramp to Route 195 eastbound from Monmouth Road, which is off the map but across the top. Phase 1 on this map, which doesn't show on the map, is to the left. This again is the approved plan. This plan approved 3 warehouse buildings containing 1.195 square feet of warehouse.
That's 1,195,000, right?
That's correct. As noted in the professionals review, the property is contained in the HCMU zone. The property has been zoned highway commercial for at least the last 40 years, as have all the adjoining properties, including phase 1. They've all been in the highway commercial zone for many years. It has been a key aspect of the township, even though that we are a fully conforming project with no variances. I think it's relevant and important to briefly talk about the master plan. The master plan has described this corridor along Monmouth Road in close proximity to Route 195 as a key destination, a commercial destination for the town. The master plan, to its goals and objectives, and the land use plan has encouraged the as they describe it, the destination type development of this property for many years. To help accommodate that, there was the HCMU zone adopted a few years ago, which is the highway commercial mixed use zone, which permits multivariate uses to accomplish the objectives of the master plan. As I said, on A1, we have the 3 warehouse buildings with the 1,195,100 square feet. If you don't mind.
Wait, before you move off that, just 2 points. One is, how would the trucks enter the site if this were built?
Thank you. The driveway into the site is up here on top that I'm describing. It's on the very northern edge of the project. Again, it's close to Monmouth Road, which is up at the edge of the map. And the truck traffic would be limited to that drive, which goes directly to an extension to Pine Drive and Monmouth Road. So the truck traffic was kept, as Mr. Cardinale testified, to the very front of the property, in the most direct access route to Monmouth Road, and thereby primarily eastbound to Route 195, as Mr. Ray will testify. In the Phase 1 project, the recreational uses are located in this area. We have ball fields at the bottom of Phase 1 with the air dome and recreation in the center part of the site. That is obviously the center point of the recreation uses that are so important to the overall project. And the main access drive, the extension of Pine Drive that runs down to this area, would not be permitted to have any trucks on it. That, as Mr. Cardinale said, was a very, very key design item from the very beginning. This remains unchanged from the original approval. That's the way the original approval limits it and describes it, and that's the way it remains with this proposed amendment.
And then one more point is the Anderson Road, that drive in the center actually goes to Anderson Road. That's limited to emergency access only, is that
Correct. That was a request of the board to do a emergency access, primarily ingress, as I understand it, for fire vehicles, but it is limited to, it's what we call grasscrete. It's a modular concrete grass with grass growing through its surface with a breakaway barrier. So the vehicles on the site would not be permitted to access it. It would only be for use by emergency vehicles. And that emergency access would remain the same for the amended project. I think I should probably describe a little more. Existing questions were asked about the residences. Again, we have Anderson Road on the right side of the map, running north and south. On the right side of Anderson Road is all residential zoning, as well as Mr. Cardinale, and you'll hear me make mention to Holly Tree Court. That is this small elbow-shaped cul-de-sac. When Anderson Road turns off, we're off the map here a little bit, Prineville Road extends downward, and there's a few larger lots, probably between 5 and 15 acres, that are also residential. But Holly Tree Court has been a key focus of our design, is obviously to protect those residents. Those two lots that are on the west side of Holly Tree Court are vacant. And then you have, I believe it's 4 homes along Anderson Road on what I would call the front of Holly Tree Court, all separated by the roadway, but obviously in close proximity to the project. The original project, I should note, my final point on the original project is the ordinance requires us as a commercial or industrial use to provide a 50-foot buffer. So the original approval, we met the standards of that, and we have a 50-foot buffer along the entire eastern boundary where the property abuts the residential zone. If you don't mind going to the next page. So here we have the proposed amended project. As was testified, we are proposing to consolidate the 2 buildings that were in the northern part of the site into a single building. The combined total of the 2 buildings is 1,002,891 square feet, which is a reduction of 16% from the approved building area. We are proposing a total of 894 parking spaces, where 670 spaces are required, which is a reduction of 28% from the 1,249 spaces proposed in the approved plan. We do provide 25 handicap spaces equally spaced around all of the buildings. The ADA requirement is that we must provide 12, so we obviously exceed that number. We did provide on the Again, on this map, the orientation has changed. We actually apologize for the confusion, but we found a better way to lay out the project to increase the scale a little bit once we did the amended plans. But Anderson Road in this plan runs across the map from left to right, and Route 195 is on the left side of the map. And you see Holly Tree Court here on the right side. There is on the top right corner, there's some green areas here in the parking lot that we showed that potentially is 40 spaces. We are proposing not to build that parking and green banking. We don't believe it's necessary, as it's not required to build those. I kind of skipped something in my parking testimony. Again, we provide 894 spaces. The amount of spaces that are required to meet the ordinance are 670. So we exceed the ordinance, but we did have the room to make even more parking, but we chose to make it green instead to allow us to do some additional plantings on that corner of the building where it abuts Anderson Road. They are available if needed. We certainly do not see them as being needed. I believe it was a question in the planner's letter, but just to make sure that the parking is fully vetted. Each of the buildings does have a small office corner as shown on the site plan and in the architectural plans submitted. We in the numbers that I just quoted, we did not separately tabulate those as office use in the parking calculation. While the planner's review didn't really question that, it did note that. That is obviously an accurate statement. And the reason we did not is because these offices are part of the warehouse use. They will not be separately leased to any, for any type of a separate use. So we believe that the tabulation is correct the way we did it. However, to be conservative, we did run the calculations. We did a what if. In other words, what if they were separately tabulated? What would that do to the required parking number of 670? And that would, if we did that, that would increase the required parking to 783, which is still substantially less than the 894 that we provide. So we don't believe it's appropriate to do it, but the parking design survives that analysis if we were asked to do so. Now, Mr. Cardinale had testified about putting the team to some stringent testing, and he certainly did that, and rightfully so. We're happy to accommodate that. A key function is the buffering, particularly given the new building number 1 orientation as it relates to Holly Tree Court. So while we provide the required 50-foot buffer along the entire residential zone boundary as per the approved plan, we particularly focused on the buffer for that portion of the site that adjoins the Holly Tree Court area. And we started with, at the minimum, doubling the buffer to 100 feet. That was our starting point. We set the task and the goal of making a minimum of 100-foot buffer, which we accomplished. But then in orienting the building the way it is, we were able to increase that buffer. Basically, you can see here that the buffer is a triangular area. So while it's 100 feet at the rear of the westernmost lot on Holly Tree Court, up where the actual houses are constructed along Anderson Road, it actually is 3 times the buffer, or more than 150 feet.
And what's the plantings in this?
Right. So, and then what we did is we're always looking to do an effective, what we call an effective 4-season screen. And so what we did in this case is we did 2 different, for lack of a better word, a double layer of earthen berm. Closer to Holly Tree Court, we have the part of the buffer that has a 2-foot high earthen berm with a double row of evergreens planted on top of it. And then as we move closer to the warehouse, we increase the height of the berm to 5 feet above the ground, above the finished grade, with the double evergreen trees planted on top of that berm. So what we have is we have 2 berms, 2-foot and 5-foot, with 4 rows of evergreen trees, with additional deciduous and shrub plantings both in front and the back of it to create what we call a four-season buffer that would be effective in any season. Basically, the ordinance requires, again, a 50-foot buffer and a two-row evergreen tree buffer. But we have obviously more than doubled that in the case of that portion of the site. I think it's important to review and to just put on the record some of the key zoning information that applies to the project. This is not changed by the project, and these were basically already approved, but just to be, to make sure it's clear on the record. As I testified to and as noted by the planner, the site is in the highway commercial mixed use zone overlay. The warehouse use is permitted by section 57.2A of that, number 9 of that ordinance. In order to qualify for the HCMU, the property has to meet certain tract requirements. And we look at the tract holistically as adventure crossing, as we did in the original approval. Under the ordinance, the tract must have a minimum area of 70 acres. We have more than 130. The tract width and frontage must be 2,900 feet, the tract depth of 1,000 feet. And we have tract width and frontage of 4,300 feet with a tract depth of 2,950 with a total area of phase 1 and 2 of 162.7 acres. So the property meets the HCMU tract requirements. The same zone also allows a building coverage of 30% and an impervious coverage of 75%. And the combined total of phase 1 and 2 is 22% for building coverage and 45% for impervious coverage. So we're well under the maximums. None of those numbers change as a result of the amendment. But I just wanted to place them on the record. Lastly, on the zoning category, the maximum building height in the HCMU zone is based upon the setback to the nearest roadway. The maximum building height permitted for building 1 based upon its setback to Anderson Road is 45 feet. That building is proposed to be 45 feet to the top of the flat roof. That is shown on the architectural building elevations that were submitted to the board. And the maximum height for building 2, because of the increased setback from Anderson Road, is actually permitted to be 90 feet, but that as well is a maximum height of 45 feet. Again, just a little bit of record keeping of things that are not changed by the amendment, but I'm sure we do have some new board members as well. We talked about the access to Monmouth Road, which is on this plan is to the bottom left. I had briefly described that it will connect to an access road close to 195 and then into an extension of the Pine Drive intersection. The project proposes significant intersections to Monmouth Road, including the 4th leg of the Pine Drive intersection into the property, modifying the existing traffic signal, among other work. All of that work has been submitted to the Monmouth County and Ocean County Planning Board. Ocean County Planning Board has approval jurisdiction, but Monmouth County has review responsibilities since the Monmouth Road is the county boundary and retains that engineering responsibility as part of an interlocal agreement with Ocean County. And the Ocean County Planning Board has granted conditional approval for both phase 1 and phase 2. We do propose site lighting of the project. It was a key part of our original approval, and it remains true for this approval, that none of that light glare is permitted to extend beyond the property as required by the ordinance. Shields will be added to all fixtures that adjoin any residential areas to ensure that the glare will not extend beyond the property line. In addition, all building mounted fixtures will be cutoff fixtures to ensure that there's no direct glare or light coming from the buildings towards any residences. Phase 2, and again, these are all things that are consistent. None of these things I'm describing now were changed by the amended approval, but just mostly housekeeping. There is no additional signage for Phase 2 other than what's already approved with Phase 1. We have no signage proposed along Anderson Road, with the exception of there is a single freestanding sign in the northeastern corner of the property, adjacent to Route 195. That is a freestanding sign that was approved with Phase 1 that remains unchanged, had an approved height of 150 feet and an area of 600 feet. That sign is only to advertise Adventure Crossing. It was noted in the reviews about tenant wall signage. Any tenant wall signage will just be for internal. We're not trying to advertise, obviously, off-site, certainly the Anderson Road, but any identifying wall signage to identify businesses or tenants would comply with the ordinance sign requirements.
And Ian, there is site identification signs as part of Phase 1 on Route 537 that
That's
would
correct.
identify.
There are separate freestanding signs approved as part of Phase 1 freestanding project signs, we call it, as well as tenant signs that are approved as part of Phase 1 that are not changed by this project.
And there'll be wayfinding signs on Phase 1 to get the traffic to wherever they're going within the complex.
That is correct. Thank you, Sal. Within Phase 1, we have signage to direct the truck traffic. We've actually worked out some of these with the county engineers to ensure that the trucks take the appropriate route off of Monmouth Road, and then on our site into the described route, as well as signs on the main boulevard down to the recreation uses that prohibit the trucks from utilizing that route. Briefly on utilities, the site will be serviced by public water and sewer. There is an existing 16-inch water main that has been constructed as part of a larger MUA project called the Western Water Main Extension, which basically bifurcates the property between the two buildings. That is a water main, a capital improvement funded by the MUA to loop in Six Flags Great Adventure, which is located to our west, into the water system. The water system for these proposed warehouses will tie and loop into that existing water main. The site is contained within the northern sanitary sewer service area for the Ocean County Water Quality Management Plan. And the buildings will be serviced by sewer that will drain to a pump station to be located on the Phase 1 part of the property.
What is the status of the MUA approvals?
We have received, for phase 1, we have received preliminary tentative and OCOA approval for the Phase 1 sewer, on-site sewer, force main and pump station. As far as the Phase 2 sewer, we have received preliminary approval from the JTMUA with a tentative application pending. Just a few more housekeeping. The property is responsible for all operation and maintenance of all parking areas, sidewalks, landscaping, lighting, utilities, stormwater system, and buildings. There are no public improvements, no public obligations for any part of the site, and that includes Phase 1 as well as Phase 2. Other than, obviously, the off-site work that's being done on Monmouth Road. Any work done on Monmouth Road, of course, would remain the obligation of the county. But certainly as far as on-site goes. Questions about refuse. This plan, this speaks to the learning process that Mr. Cardinale testified to about potential warehouse tenants. Besides the shape of the building and the proposal to consolidate the buildings, we've also learned that the general practice is to manage the refuse indoors, generally with them. However, to make sure that we cover all bases, the plans do include optional, we call them optional refuse enclosures. Those refuse enclosures do contain adequate room for separate areas for collection of recyclable materials as well as trash. There will be a private carter to collect those. There will be no just as a separate matter, there will be no outdoor storage on any part of the property.
And the refuse handled inside is through compactors, generally?
Yes, generally. Which is, I believe, primarily recycling cardboard, but, and that's why I believe they do it inside. I believe Graham will address the stormwater management. We originally had a stormwater basin on the southern part of the property, which remains as in the same configuration as approved. As part of this redesign and this amendment, we do propose a second basin on the north side. Mr. McFarland will testify as to the functions being performed by them in their compliance with the code. Two things to wrap up my testimony. One is that we have reviewed comments from both the board engineer and board planner. We've read those. We agree with those. We would agree to address all of those. I should have noted on the basins, the safety fence will be provided around both basins. And my last item was a waiver that was granted as part of the original approval. The only waiver that we have, again, we have no variances, but we have a single waiver. And that single waiver was for curb and sidewalk along Anderson Road. The ordinance requires, as the board knows, that any property that adjoins a public road construct curb or sidewalk or donate the cost to construct same to the pedestrian safety fund, the township fund. And we did receive that waiver for the original approval. We would ask that waiver to be granted to this as well with payment in lieu of construction. Again, given that we're not proposing any improvements along Anderson Road, it doesn't seem appropriate to construct those. We're trying to soften our impact on the road.
The couple follow-ups. Did you prepare an EIS for both phase one, and did you supplement it for this application?
I did. I did prepare a separate one for phase one and phase two. And the phase two was updated for the amended project the board is reviewing tonight, and that is dated November 19th of 2020.
And is there anything in that report that would impact in any way what's being proposed this evening?
It does not. We did receive a single comment from the Environmental Commission. I can't find now. Yeah, we were requested in a letter from the Environmental Commission to provide information as to mitigation and protection strategies for wildlife. Understanding that there's no regulatory requirement for same, but it is our obligation to protect that environmentally sensitive properties, which I think this is good. I should have testified to this. And our primary protection strategy is we have wetlands, particularly on the southern portion of the property. It's this area that's white in the southwestern corner. We have wetlands in the corner of the property, and we are proposing, we have an LOI that's pending at the DEP. I actually walked the site last week with the review manager from DEP, and we have not been notified what the buffer is, but We have provided the maximum buffer per the Freshwater Wetlands Act, which is 150 feet. And we do so because the wetlands that extend onto phase one has received an LOI and is what they call exceptional resource value. So we certainly expect the same classification for that wetland. So we do provide the 150-foot buffer as required. In addition, there's a small area of wetland up on the northern part of the site that's adjoining the Route 195 ramp that's also being remaining undeveloped. And that is a 50-foot buffer because that is an intermediate classification. We are proposing a couple of wetland permits that are under review by the board, or by the DEP, I'm sorry. One is a general permit 11, which is a stormwater outflow from the southernmost detention basin. And the second one is a general permit 10A of what they call a very minor road crossing for the truck access road that extends from phase one into phase two. Again, both of those are under review by the DEP. I would note that we were contacted last week by the DEP. We had a field meeting. Not only did I have a field meeting with the gentleman who's reviewing the wetlands delineations on phase two, but we met with other staff at DEP. Apparently complaints were registered about activities in phase one that were felt to be in potential violation of the Freshwater Wetlands Act. I reviewed that in the field with them last Tuesday. I don't know if a notice of violation is forthcoming or not, but in any event, whatever the DEP asks us to do, we will do. But that is as part of phase one. Phase two, there's been no development work that has occurred on phase two, and there certainly is no activities on phase two.
The only other thing is there's an A3 that we've introduced into evidence, but we didn't talk about, so.
Yeah, we should just, if you don't mind, scroll up. Thank you, sir. Yes, this is the architectural elevation that was submitted as part of the larger set of architectural plans. This shows the various building elevations, which you can see are generally the same, but primarily what this shows is the proposed color scheme of the building and the height of the building. As I testified, it's 45 feet to the top of the flat roof.
And in conclusion, you also indicated that the various technical comments contained within the two professional reports would be addressed as part of a resolution compliance.
Yes.
Thank you. So we have Mr. Board, Mr. Chair. You have some?
No, I'm good.
Questions for Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Herring.
This is, Len Herring, is for the warehouses, is that could be a 24/7 operation?
That's how it was approved, the first application, and it most likely will be again. Again, without identifying a tenant, we can't say, but yes.
And the reason I'm asking is that, if you're, trucks and everything going around it, with the noise factor that you'd have from trucks, it could be 2 in the morning, it could be whatever with these, some of these truck drivers, use the, engine brakes and things like that in those areas, where you'll get a lot of noise. You might get some spillover to the people in Anderson and at Holly Court.
We've done in other warehouse projects that I've been involved in. One of the things that the board's asked us to consider is putting in our leases that there could be no idling when the trucks are parked, things of that nature to minimize the impact. And we'd certainly work with the board on any of those types of suggestions.
Yeah, including no engine braking.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up, do you anticipate using, having tenants like food processing groups, a bakery, a commercial bakery, things like that in those areas?
I think warehousing, I guess there's no use that's excluded, but I think what I'm hearing is there will be no manufacturing or processing. So
As far as you know.
correct, that's not what we're proposing. We're proposing simply warehousing.
No, I mean, because what I do, when I'm not here, I see a lot of businesses like food processing, everything might be wedged between a tire manufacturer and a real estate office, in those type of warehouses. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention that sometimes some of these food processing things could be relatively small, but
Right.
generate an awful lot of waste and, you know, pest control issues, things like that.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't propose that type of use.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I see Mr. Alfieri writing down his notes, that would be, you would accept that should the board act favorably as a condition of approval, that you're not looking to manufacture.
And I'm not sure it's even a permitted use
I
in the
don't think
zone.
it is.
I don't think it's permitted, but
Those are only permitted in the industrial zones in town.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You will have air handlers on the roofs?
For heating and air conditioning, yes.
Okay, did you take that into account when you said the height of the building was X amount of feet? Does that include the air handlers?
No, the township, there's a parapet that goes around the roof that would shield those units. The parapet by definition is not included in the height of the building.
And will this building have a generator backup to it? Will it need to have that?
generator backup,
Mhm.
I'm not sure.
I
We'll have to, I don't think we're gonna finish tonight, so we'll get you an answer at the next meeting. about the
Okay, thank you.
generators.
I had one more, Mr. Gordon, when Mr. Cardinale was speaking, he was talking about, so you're in a hotel room, you can't see the warehouses and everything. Can you show on that plan where the vegetation is? Because it didn't look like there was an awful lot.
Yes, if you go back, this actually does show part of the phase one improvements. This is the hotel that Mr. Cardinale was referring to. This is the Hilton Hotel.
Right.
These are the ball fields down here to the right. And what we were describing, what Mr. Cardinale was describing, you can see some landscaping here. On the phase one side of the truck access road for phase two, we're gonna plant some screen plantings that simply screen the two uses
On phase one.
on phase one.
Do you think that'll be sufficient to basically block the view
Yes,
from, you know, somebody coming out watching somebody unloading a truck while they're in the middle of a wedding or something like that?
that is correct. Yes, it will be.
Mr. Wright.
I'm sorry.
Would the applicant just stipulate on approval that you're going to put in signage for the no jake braking to take the onus off the applicant and put it onto the individual driver?
That's a great idea.
Where the problem really resides?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we already have the signs, as I described, saying no truck traffic and stuff. We'll certainly add
Yeah,
that.
just with the jake braking,
No, that-
you know, it really, in my opinion, it belongs on the operator, not the applicant.
I agree. That's a good idea.
Yes, Mr. Wall.
A brief item, if the applicant's professional could summarize. Oftentimes, an applicant comes back with an approval seeking relief to either increase parking, decrease a buffer, increase density. So you're coming in with an approval to just, I want to clarify, maybe you could summarize the key points. Is it reducing the parking lots, increasing the buffer? It's contrary to a lot of applications that come in for relief to increase density and to reduce buffers. Can you just summarize those key points from the approval that currently is in place
Certainly.
and the changes? Just the bullet point, just to
Certainly. Thank you. Yes, we are reducing the building area by 16%,
So reducing the building area, that's 16%
1/6.
from the current approval.
That's correct.
Okay.
We are reducing the parking, I believe it was 28%, the
So
number of spaces.
28%, was that from the approximately 1,200
Yes.
parking spaces down